So today we will be talking about how to create accessible documents. So we'll jump right in. Quick introduction for those of you who have not joined before. My name is Shelby Kapler. I coordinate the Wyoming Accessible Educational Materials Clearinghouse here at the Wyoming Institute for Disabilities. I work with our Wyoming Assistive Technology Resources team, and I can be contacted at 307-766-5770 or by email at skapple and the number 1 at uwyo.edu. So today I'm talking about accessible documents. Why create accessible documents? So the biggest reason is that not all documents are created equal. And building off of our session from last week, talking about universal design for learning, we want to ensure that all of our documents are accessible to anyone who may want to read them or need to read them. So primarily we are thinking about screen reader users when we think about accessible documents. So for anyone who might be unfamiliar with that term, a screen reader is an assistive technology. It's a software that's built into most computers and tablets, and there are also downloadable versions that provide non-visual access to the screen. So someone with low vision or no vision can still access a computer or a tablet without having to see the screen at all. So typically, screen readers are navigated by using keyboard controls or gestures on a tablet. And like I said, they allow those with no or low vision to interact with the content on the screen. We also think about students with print disabilities who may use text to speech, thinking about people with other types of visual impairments, maybe color blindness, who have difficulty interacting with certain types of printed text, and also students with various neurodivergence diagnoses who can benefit from alternate formats and accessible documents. Also thinking, um, I think it's a common misconception that we don't have people who require accessible documents. Well, I don't have someone with a visual impairment in my class, so I don't need to do this. But in reality, there are a number of hidden or invisible disabilities, undiagnosed or undisclosed disabilities. And in general, I think it's just a good practice to ensure that all of your documents are accessible because we don't always know who they're going to. So with this presentation, we're going to cover Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. But do keep in mind that all of these principles are going to be utilized and available on most other word processors and other platforms such as Google. So moving into Microsoft Word, we want to start out with styles and headings. So styles are used for people who are low vision or blind or colorblind, and they help to differentiate the text so that those are easier to read. So thinking about things like bold and italics, this is where you might use styles. And headings are also going to be found within the styles menu. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. Headings are necessary to navigate using a screen reader, just like someone with vision might scroll or scan through an article or a document, just reading the headings and titles. A screen reader user can do the same thing. They can navigate through heading level, jump through titles or subtitles, or they can go from heading to heading. So they might look at all of the different titles within a document. It seems like common sense, but I'll mention it anyway, that you want to use headings in order. Heading level 1 is going to be your main title. Heading level 2 will be a major section header. And heading number 3 is going to be your subsection titles. I believe they do offer up to 6 heading levels, although typically just 1 through 3 are used. and you want to keep those headings in order. So if anyone has heard the joke about the senior prank where the seniors released 3 sheep into the school labeled 1, 2, and 4, and the teachers went crazy looking for the last one that didn't exist, we don't want to do that to our screen reader users. So a little bit more into headings. You will find headings on your main home ribbon in Microsoft Word. I am a Mac user, so most of these screenshots are from my Mac side, but I believe it looks pretty similar for Windows users as well. So toward the right-hand side of your home ribbon in Word, you'll see the styles, and this is where you have normal, no spacing, heading 1, heading 2. If you hit that arrow below those, you'll bring down various other heading levels. You'll see things that say like emphasis. So emphasis is going to be italics, strong is going to be bold, and each of these do have their own default formatting. But if you right click on a particular style and hit modify, you'll be able to change it to adjust to match the rest of the document. So you can change your font size, spacing, color, and all that fun stuff. Thinking about formatting in a document, you really want to stick to the controls that are provided within the Microsoft Word settings. So if you want to use a title, you'll want to use the center align to center that title. The reason for this is that screen readers know when you manually format something. So if you're using several different tab keys or the space bar to get your title all the way over to the center, the screen reader will read that as tab, 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 title. Similarly, if you use enters or returns to space out your paragraphs, the screen reader is going to read that as well. Enter, 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 and then start reading your text. So it can get a bit tedious. And so for that reason, try not to use those enter, tabs, spaces, returns for formatting. Try and use page breaks where you can, as well as paragraph breaks if you need to have multiple spaces between paragraphs. You can right click on your text and hit paragraph, and then you'll have spacing options. And then use the alignment options. So typically left aligned is the easiest to read and what we're most used to. Center aligned is best for titles. Right aligned and justified text, I personally haven't found a great use for. Maybe you have, but right aligned text tends to be a lot more difficult to read and track. And justified text too can be difficult because of the inconsistencies with spacing. Lists are something else we may encounter in our documents. So it's best to use either ordered or unordered lists, again, that you'll find in the Microsoft Word menus. Ordered lists are numbered lists, and unordered are bulleted lists. So screen readers are able to read lists, and they can also jump from list to list if you have multiple lists in a document. But screen readers will not recognize it as a list if it's simply indented, if it's been manually numbered, or if fancy bullets like pictures or symbols are used as bullet points instead of the built-in bullet points. Something else I want to talk about here is descriptive links. So often included in documents or on web pages are links. And the screen readers, again, can jump from links on a page. So if the screen reader user has read the entire article and wants to go back and look at a particular link, they can do that. They can scroll through just the links until they find the one they're looking for, unless each link is labeled click here. So that can be very difficult, not only for screen reader users, but also for those individuals who have sight and are able to look through and see the different links, but it can be a lot more work to figure out which link it was that they actually wanted to look at if they have to read the text before the click here option every time. So this is where we want to use specific descriptive link language to describe the links, and keep that link text short if possible. So just a word or a phrase. Like I said, often you'll see vague language like click here, more information, and we want to make it really clear where that link is taking us. So a poor example of this could be for more information on Dutch tulips, click here, and click here is our linked text. So that's not very descriptive. A better example might be check out our website for more information on Dutch tulips. So information on Dutch tulips is our linked text, and that way the user is going to know exactly where they're going. Talking about images within a Word document. So images must be in line with the text in order to be accessible. If you're able to grab that image and drag it anywhere on your document, place it over text, it's probably not in line and it's going to not be accessible to someone using a screen reader. If you can grab your image and you have to place it somewhere where the cursor lands, then it's going to be in line and the screen reader will recognize that it's there and read it. You want to add alternative text or alt text to your images, and we'll talk a little bit more about alt text in the PowerPoint section. It can be helpful to include a description of the image in the body of the text. So for example, on my little document to the right here, I say that the Netherlands is known worldwide for its sprawling tulip fields. Then I've got a picture of sprawling tulip fields with various colors from pink to yellow to orange and red. And then the text underneath says tulips come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. So in this case, the image is essentially described in the text. So a few other considerations when creating Word documents is that text boxes are not accessible to screen readers. So much like an image has to be in line with the text, text boxes also, if they're just floating around, are not going to be recognized by a screen reader. In order to combat this, you could use a table that has just a single row and column and put your text in there, and that's going to be accessible to the screen reader. Headers and footers also are not accessible. So if you put important information in those locations, know that someone using a screen reader is not going to be able to interact with that text. The screen reader won't even see that it's there. I understand that this goes against certain professional formatting standards, and I have not come up with an alternative for that. However, in the meantime, if you are able to not use those headers and footers, you can include that information in the body of the text or on a separate reference page, maybe at the end, so that individuals can still get that information. You always want to consider your font type and size, considering that sans serif fonts, so anything that does not have the fancy tails like Times New Roman does, is going to be good. So texts like Arial, Calibri, Helvetica are good texts to use. They don't have those fancy serifs or tails, which can be confusing, especially to students with reading disabilities like dyslexia. Generally, 18-point font or larger is considered large print. We also want to try and convey information in more than one visual identifier. So if you're using color, consider also doing bold or italic or underlining, or a combination of these, just because we are considering color blindness as well. And lastly, try to avoid large chunks of bold, underlined, italic, or caps lock text. because again, this can be difficult for some users to read. So with that, we'll move on to PowerPoint. I'm just going to keep going for the sake of time, but if you do have any questions as we go along, please throw them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. So layouts, so within slideshow, you want to use pre-created layouts. And this is probably what a lot of us do is when you go into the Insert tab and click New Slide, and you're going to have options like your title slide, your heading slide, things like that. So as long as you're using those are already accessible. However, if you alter any of those, like adding text boxes or images, it will change the reading order. So again, if a screen reader is going through, it's going to naturally read the heading first and then the body next. But then if you add in those other text boxes and images, you'll need to double check the reading order and that it's how you want it to be and makes sense. Yep, also ensure that each slide has its own unique title for ease of navigation, both for screen reader users and anyone accessing the PowerPoint. So here we are back to alternative text. And we'll have a couple slides on this because it can be a little bit complicated. Basically, alt text is providing a description of an image. There are artificial intelligence that are getting a little bit smarter that produce alternative text, but it is not always the most accurate and sometimes entirely wrong. So we want to go in and put our own alt text into these images, and we can do that by right-clicking on the image, scrolling down to either edit alt text or format picture, whichever you have on your version, and then you'll be able to type out your alt text there. So when we're thinking about alt text, first question we want to ask is, what is the purpose of the image? Is it there just to add something pretty to look at and make it a little bit more visually appealing? And if that's the case, then the image is probably decorative. And in this case, it's going to need very little to no description. Depending on the version of Word that you're using, you may or may not have a mark as decorative checkbox underneath your image description box. So you can check the box as decorative if the image does not provide any contextual value or important information. In that case, the screen reader will ignore the image as if it's not there. This does not always work if you're converting it to a PDF. And again, the mark as decorative option may not be available on all versions or platforms. If the image is informative, we want to think about which information is important. What is it? What's the image trying to say? Why is it included? Be clear, concise, and accurate with your image descriptions. So if it is an informative image, to write the alt text, first we want to think about, is the information in the image already described in the text? If it is, we just need a minimal description. If it's not, we can be a little bit more descriptive. We do want to try to use as few words as possible so as not to overwhelm the user. We want to try and be objective, using facts and describing only what can be seen in the images. We don't want to interpret the images. For example, if there were two people smiling in an image, that might be exactly what you say, is two people smiling. We can't necessarily say that they are happy because that would be interpreting the image. When describing images, you want to use logical sequence, something that makes sense, like describing the foreground first and then the background, or describing the image from left to right, whatever makes sense for the image you're describing. Screen readers themselves will identify when they reach an image. They'll say image of, and then read that alt text. Some screen readers may say graphic of. So for that reason, we don't need to begin our written descriptions with that type of language, like image or picture of. The caveat to this is if the picture, the format of the picture is relevant. So if it's a painting or a diagram, then it might be necessary to include that context for understanding. You also want to include any text that might be important for meaning in the alt text description. So lastly, we'll move on to accessible Excel documents. So here we want to, mostly we're going to be using tables and charts and those kinds of things. I know that tables can get really complex for any of us to read. So in general, you want to try and keep tables simple and only present data in the tables. For everyone, not only for screen readers, but for general understanding, it's best to use column headers in every table. If the table spans across multiple pages, then repeat the headers at the top of each page, and don't break rows across pages. And you can go in and do this in the table formatting menu. Try not to leave any cells blank. Screen readers will read those or ignore them. They get really confusing. So if you don't have any data, you can put a 0 or something along those lines in order to help the screen reader and the screen reader user stay oriented to the table. Give your table a descriptive title and add alt text to your table. So again, this can get extremely complex, especially depending on the context of your table. It might be easier with simpler tables, and there are other ways to add alt text or table descriptions. Again, we want to try and keep that alt text shorter and simpler. If your table or graphic does need a more substantial description, then you may consider adding a separate page and writing up a full description of that content. But for this short table that I have on this slide, a sufficient alt text could be something like this individual walks 20 miles, walks 1 mile in 20 minutes, rather than describing out each and every cell and all the data. When thinking about charts, again, we want to be able to add alt text and titles that are descriptive and meaningful, and also consider color blindness when putting together charts. So on the left-hand side of this slide, I have a pie chart with various shades of pink and orange. This was the default pie chart that PowerPoint gave me. And so some of these colors might be really difficult for individuals with low vision or visual impairments or colorblind to differentiate. So whereas on the right-hand side, I modified this pie chart. So you've got a couple different colors, thinking about colors, patterns, things like that. So even if an individual had color blindness or was only able to see in sort of a grayscale, the darker pink here would still be a different value from the other solid, which is a lighter orange. And then there are polka dots and lines as well. So that helps to really differentiate and distinguish each of those slices. If you're using multiple sheets, be sure to name each of the sheets with a meaningful title. So in this case, we have quarterly sales for 2019, and then the other sheet there is annual sales 2015 through 2019. So again, just being really clear with what it is that we're doing. So lastly, just some things to keep in mind here. There is an accessibility ribbon that is available in all of these platforms that we've just talked about, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. You have to download that accessibility ribbon. It's separate. Um, Even though all features are available on existing ribbons, it might be beneficial to have that accessibility ribbon so everything's all in one spot. Again, consider your color contrast, and that red and green and blue yellow are the most common forms of color blindness. And for individuals with color blindness, those colors or shades of those colors can kind of run together and get really muddy and difficult to distinguish. Again, all of these guidelines can apply to other Microsoft Office products and other documents and programs as well. Remember that the more accessible it is to begin with, then the less work it will be to try and remediate it later to make it accessible. You can convert Word documents to accessible PDFs if you have access to Adobe Acrobat. And Microsoft does have a built-in accessibility checker, and there are other free accessibility checkers online. So I think let's skip ahead, Krista, just till the reminders page. So I do have a couple of slides here on the accessibility checker, but in the interest of time, I think that we are going to save that for next session when we talk about how to ensure that teacher-made and accessed materials are accessible. So for now, please do complete our short survey. Your feedback and suggestions are very helpful for us in creating these presentations. If you're interested in keeping up to date with further presentations and trainings that we have, you can sign up for our monthly dispatch email newsletter. If you are interested in a certificate of attendance for this training, you can reach out to me or the water team, and we'll send that over to you. And lastly, our next training will be on December 3rd, again at 3:30 p.m.